hello, you should not expect timeliness from me as a creator or as a person. It's just, it's not my forte. But you guys, you asked some really good questions and I'm really excited to get into them, so let's just jump right into it. Someone named Kibitzer asked, you seem to pop out of nowhere with these high quality, high informative videos, so I wanted to know, where did you come from? What is motivating you? Where did you learn to make videos and scripts? First of all, thank you. I'm so glad that you're finding these videos to be informative and high quality. So this is actually my second YouTube channel. The first one I had was on Canadian politics and current events. Don't go looking for it, all the videos have been privated now. But I got to work out a bunch of the very basics of video creation through doing that. I also used to do photography full time, so I had a good amount of the required equipment and experience using it. I still make mistakes. I have technical issues with every video I make, but it's fine, it's good enough. We're working with what we have and we're learning as we go. As for what motivated the switch, I mean, it was just very miserable work. I would do all this research into various systems within, the Canadian political system, and basically always come to the conclusion that the systems are rotten. They're just broken all the way down. And on every level, there are people who care and are working very, very hard to fix things. And on every level, it's set up so that they have functionally no path to successfully enacting any sort of long-term meaningful change from within those systems. So I get to the end of the video and I'd be like, so everything is literally on fire. I don't know, go vote, I guess, call your local representatives, get involved with, I don't fucking, so I'd just be sitting there in a puddle of my own tears and sounding like a hostage. I very, very badly wanted to offer some sort of hope and solutions and action items, but I also so evidently did not believe a single word that I was saying. So anyways, yeah, I was very much already on my way to becoming more and more radicalized in my beliefs and in my worldview, although the pandemic did speed that up quite a bit. And so when I did finally get a chance to really access anarchism and anarchist theory, I went down that rabbit hole very obsessively, if I'm being honest, with an almost religious fervor, some have called it, because it felt like I was finally being handed hope, and not in this delusional, desperate hope kind of way that I was so used to given my experiences with the left, and especially the online left up until that point, but actual hope that came with an action plan and theory that made sense to me and historical precedent, and it was all just beautifully packaged up if you went to go looking for it, but most people don't get a chance to go looking for it. And so as I consumed all of that theory and participated in all of those discussions and started to integrate those ideas into my life, and especially within my relationships, I could immediately see the impact and effectiveness of those ideas. But like I said, not everyone is an obsessive ADHD rabbit hole spelunker who's been, chasing after a way out or an action plan for well over a decade at this point. And a lot of the material is super dense and requires a certain amount of requisite knowledge and experience to really resonate with, I guess, because they do all sort of build up on top of each other. Trying to explain it to other people is really hard, especially because it's a whole paradigm shift compared to what we're taught about how to think about big problems. So basically, more than anything else, I realized that I was basically, wow, use the word basically more often. This is why I use a script. Yeah, so essentially, more than anything else, I realized that I was basically almost perfectly prefigured to be able to contribute to this relatively low barrier archive for these ideas, and to do it in a way that's, more immediately relatable. Because while not everyone is this emotionally invested in systemic change, I think everyone does have relationships that they're emotionally invested in, and everyone runs into tension within those relationships, and everyone wants to feel connected and valued and they're, part of something bigger than themselves. So I think relationship anarchy works really, really well as a sort of entry point or gateway into understanding anarchist theory beyond just the words and the jargon and all of that, if that makes sense. And then a silly question, do you have a favorite beverage? I do, it's Coke Zero. I say this without even a hint of exaggeration. I probably go through 8 or 9 liters of the stuff a week. I drink it instead of water, and I've been doing that since I was a teenager. I am well aware that this is bad for my health, but it's also good for my spirit. Okay, Oh Mr. Japan asks, there's a lot of context around this question, but basically there's something sticking for me at the moment around the idea of hierarchy and something like favorite people. An anarchic way of relating means that no type of relationship is, by virtue of its shape/components alone, more valuable than another. But what about the people we choose to prioritize? Our time and other resources are limited, and we make choices every day about where to allocate them. Something feels conceptually tangled, and I'm wondering if you could offer clarity. This is a really good question. There's this saying that you've probably come across within non-monogamous spaces. I'm kind of assuming that that's where you're kind of coming from with this. And the saying is basically something along the lines of like, love is infinite, but resources are finite. And I kind of want to like debunk that a little bit. And I'm going to start with the more pedantic side of things. First of all, love isn't infinite. It's not. There are approximately 8 billion people on this planet. That's too big a number for us to even like fully wrap our heads around, let alone love, right? Like as individuals. I don't even know what our quantifiable capacity for love is, but I know that it isn't infinite. Not even close. It's probably somewhere between like 1 and 20,000 people, I don't know. And I'm gonna go ahead and guess that it's probably like on the lower end of that completely made up arbitrary spectrum that I just pulled out of my ass. But that's obviously like not what people mean. What people mean when they say love is infinite is that love is not a competition, and that having a robust network of care and community and love isn't like a drain on your capacity to love others. And if anything, it like actually adds to your capacity, because like the fuller your cup is, the more you can kind of pour out, if that makes sense. The other half of that sentiment, that resources are finite, is also misleading, I think. Like, sure, yes, there are only 24 hours in the day, we only have so much time, we only have so much money, we only have so much energy, but like we don't all have the same access to those resources, right? And the resources that we do have access to, or the amount of those resources that we have access to, isn't immutable. It turns out that like resources also beget more resources. So like Kim Kardashian gets to spend her 24 hours very, very differently than you do, right? She doesn't have to expend her energy on things like cooking or cleaning or menial labor if she doesn't want to. She can have other people take care of those things for her, and so she has more time to do what she wants. She can rest, take time off, sleep in, so she has more energy to do those things with. She has an incredible amount of capital. So she has the capacity to spend it freely and to invest it in a way that like allows her to procure more capital. Like money makes more money, right? Do you get what I'm saying? The issue with love is infinite but resources are finite is that it assumes that because things are the way that they must continue to be that way. It encourages prioritization in a way that like legitimizes and reproduces the systems that deplete our resources. So when we talk about our favorite people, like yes, of course, there are going to be people in our life that we're going to connect with more deeply than others, but that can't be like the end of the sentiment. You know what I mean? Why are we able to connect more deeply with them? Why do we want to spend so much of our time and energy with them? Hierarchy is an amazingly effective funnel. If you're not actively working to understand it and deconstruct it in your life, you will inevitably reproduce it. Like you just go right down that path. And like, okay, let's take kids for example. Are we gonna do kids for example? We are. I'm not a parent, but we're gonna do kids. I don't care, bite me. Don't bite me. Please be nice to me. It is extremely normalized that parents should prioritize their children's well-being above their own. But then you start to listen to the grown children of self-martyring adults and realize that that actually has a pretty unfortunate impact on their well-being. Which makes perfect sense, right? Like a parent that is under-resourced does not have the capacity to model healthy boundaries, to model genuine respect and agency, to model effective communication and healthy conflict resolution, and to honor the wholeness of their child's personhood, right? Instead, it creates scenarios where both parent and child are like trapped in this objectifying dynamic. You hear a lot about adults, parents that like swear to give their children everything they never had, and then like grow to resent their children for having everything they didn't have, and also for not like doing enough with those resources that the parents sacrificed so much to acquire, without fully realizing that they've also handed their kids like a different boatload of trauma that they have to now untangle and do things with. And then you have this sort of intergenerational cycle of trauma that is pretty hard to like work your way out of. You also hear about children who grew up within very like codependent parent-child dynamics, who never had, again, like healthy interdependence modeled for them, and then become adults who confuse codependency within their relationships for love, effectively cutting themselves off from like an interdependent community and repeating the cycle. Whereas if adults are able to demonstrate healthy boundaries for their kids and have robust community so that they can rest and enjoy their hobbies and have fun with other adults and still be there for their kids and still feel secure in the knowledge that their kids always have someone trusted around to turn to, and that their kids have, you know, an abundance of unique and wonderful relationships within their communities, then that models like a completely different relational dynamic, if that makes sense. Or like, does that make sense? Or for a completely different example, we can take a quick look at desirability politics, just real quick. It's also super normalized to have like preferences based on a person's weight or body type, just for example. And like, that's fine. I'm not saying you have to expend your limited time and energy dating fat people, and like definitely don't do it out of some misguided sense of social justice or fetishization. Like we don't solve hierarchies by toppling them or replacing them, or, you know. But also, like, where did that preference come from? And how does it affect you? If you've internalized the idea that fatness is inherently undesirable or less desirable, how does that impact the way that you interact with fat people? How does it affect not only your words or your choices, but also like your tone and your body language? You know what I mean? How does it affect your relationships with loved ones when their bodies change, or when different body types become popular or ideal or trendy now? How does it affect your self-perception and self-esteem when you put on some weight, or when you wear something that makes you look fatter than usual? Like, I'm not saying we should abandon our favorite people, like just ditch them, but I do think it's really worthwhile and even vital to like interrogate how and why they became our favorite people. No one is advocating that you make an effort to have an equal relationship with everyone around you. You don't need to have infinite capacity for love, and you don't even need to have infinite resources. But I think it's critical to be aware of the fact that our priorities didn't emerge in a vacuum, and that we're being, again, very effectively herded into certain social pockets based on our own standing within all the various hierarchies that exist, like within our own spot, our own social location, if you will, within the matrix of domination. I'm not gonna qualify any of those terms. But I think it's like crucial to be aware of the fact that our priorities and our preferences didn't emerge in a vacuum. It's not about equality, it's about liberation. So we need to ask ourselves, what effect do those priorities have on our communities? What effect do they have on our loved ones? What effect do they have on ourselves? And, you know, to what extent does the amalgamation of those effects shape the way that we're able to like move through life, and the resources that we're able to access, and the things that we're able to do? Are we cultivating more abundance, or are we maintaining or reinforcing scarcity? Does your sense of security and well-being within a relationship come from the knowledge that no matter what happens, you have an abundance of wonderful relationships with people who are invested in your well-being and abundant access to all of the things that all of you need? Or does your sense of security come from control, from the knowledge that like you're established in your position, and that, you know, as long as you can help it, things will mostly stay the same? Does it come from knowing that when push comes to shove, you can count on certain needs being met, because it would be very costly, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, for your favorite people to deprioritize you? And if you're lacking a sense of security and well-being within your relationships, like, to what extent does that come from like the fear of being displaced by someone more valuable? And to what extent does that come from a fear of being too valued, too objectified or fetishized even? It's like, if you stop performing your role, everything will fall apart. Such that if you needed to like switch things up or take a step back for whatever reason, your loved ones wouldn't have the capacity to accommodate that, and they would, you know, fall apart, or your relationship would fall apart, or both. Do you know what I mean? Like, are you stuck in the spot that you're in because if you shifted, everything would fall on top of you. Do you know what I mean? Or fall from under you? I don't know. Does that make sense? I realize I've been saying you, but I don't mean like you commenter. I mean it like very generally, because this is a question that comes up a lot when it comes to doing relationship anarchy and priorities and all of that. To offer something a little bit more concrete, I do think that we can have healthy prioritization, but that it is developed through flexibility. Like, I think we can rewire those hierarchical neural pathways and build relationships that are safe and mutually enriching because they're able to like not only withstand change, but embrace it. Relationships that are able to meet, you know, large and small changes, circumstantial and day-to-day shifts in priorities by adapting, accommodating and bending rather than breaking. We can have boundaries that are flexible and fluid and constantly in flux without them being porous. Like, just because they shift doesn't mean that they're non-existent or that, you know, you have to do it in such a way that other people trample you. And I think that largely comes from having or building like a solid network of people who are also working towards, you know, building this sort of community that centers subjectification rather than objectification. Am I going to just say that without qualifying any of those words? Yes, I am. I am. There are so many videos that I want to do. There's so much I want to talk about, but they take me a long time. Sometimes I wish that I could just like hand people a list of resources or books to read, but I know from experience that like it's really hard for people to navigate that sort of material, especially if they don't have like the life experiences that are in alignment with those materials, unless there's someone to like walk them through it. No, okay, look, in the most like barest of bare bones, subjectification meaning to like sort of operate with the understanding that people are holistic beings with like, you know, a backstory and a forward story, and that we are constantly moving and constantly changing because that's how people work and that's how time works. And objectification being kind of operating with the understanding that people are objects, but not literally like an object, but like a character with a purpose, kind of like an NPC, or even like a main character, I think is also a way to sort of self-objectify, because you're kind of operating with this understanding that there is like an author that is writing your story for you. So if you're not living up to whatever expectations that author has for you, then you're failing at it. I don't know, is that making any sense? I'm just completely rambling now. If I think about it for too long, I will chicken out of posting this. So, moving on. Magma asks, how do you relate to accelerationism, ongoing complexity collapse of globalized industrial civilization culminating in the current mass extinction, music, object-oriented ontology, absurdism, levels of irony, ecological interdependence, moral error theory, not knowing why existence occurs, consciousness. I don't know, there's a lot going on there. Music is cool. I like music. I listen to music every single day for a long time. I really struggle with silence, obviously. I say obviously, yeah. Next question. Miles Kelly says, we are all better off with a wide range of people to relate with, but few people are familiar with these ideas and methods of relating, nor the underlying reasons and commitments that lead us to them. This makes introducing people to these ideas pretty difficult and pulls us towards others who are already within this small ideological community. How do we broaden this limited circle of people? It's a beautiful question, and one that I've definitely wrestled with as well. Ultimately, I think the answer is going to be incredibly dependent on your own unique circumstances, desires, and capacities, which I understand isn't all that helpful as a standalone answer. But so, for me, my life experiences have developed me into someone who can, albeit very slowly, write and produce content that I'm hoping can effectively familiarize people with these ideas and methods of relating in a way that resonates with them. Other than that, relating with people who are already within this small ideological community, who are, you know, already closely aligned with my values and my perspectives, fuels me and kind of gives me the opportunity to rest, which also allows me to have relationships with people who are outside of but adjacent-ish to this community. I also know that like the non-anarchist people in my life who relate with me, though in smaller doses and over longer periods of time, do gain like a lot more exposure to these ideas on both a theoretical and practical level, and as a result are also like very evidently becoming radicalized by our relationship. if that makes sense. Relating closely with people who are like quite a ways away is very like emotionally and mentally exhausting for me. So it's not something that I choose to focus on for the most part, though there are, there are always exceptions. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm at as far as spreading these ideas. Other people have different capacities. Some do really well with like public debates. Some do well with organizing groups locally and online for discussing these ideas and introducing them to newcomers. Some do well with like walking individuals through these ideas in like one-on-one conversational settings. Some do well creating the more intense theoretical and historical works that form the foundational understanding needed for me to do what I do. And so on and so forth. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and I think as long as you're like engaging with a community like this, learning, soaking it in, participating, then whatever approach you do end up taking based on where you're individually situated is pretty likely to also end up contributing to this vast and interconnected network of folks who are working to, broaden this limited circle of people and also to strengthen the ideological understanding of people within it. It doesn't happen overnight, but it is happening. Yeah, I think we'll stop here. Thanks again to everyone who submitted their questions. Thank you to all of you choosing to spend your time listening to me talk about this stuff. And thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel. I am very grateful that you're here, and I'm excited to hopefully do more of these in the future. Cheers, goodbye.